Hello, Daisy.
Hello, Shira.
Happy Wednesday.
Yep, yep. Yay.
How are you? Oh my God, we're both in green today.
We didn't talk about it.
We did not talk about it. And I didn't notice it before. That's where my brain is right now. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get started because I am so excited about this week. We had so much fun last week talking about what's going on in terms of the risks around AI and what's the kind of the catastrophes that we're seeing. And we had so many amazing responses. So this was kind of the natural follow-up. So we'll kick this off and get started. I want to welcome everyone to the Glass House. This is where we look at business from the inside and the outside to expose the gap between what's embedded and what's actually embodied in the organization. I am Shara Halixer. I am the founder and chief momentum officer of Engage 3P. I made a monster.
Hi, I'm Daisy Watkins, CEO and founder of DW Concepts and LumaPath.ai. I can't even say my own company. Okay, good.
Great. So exciting today. If you are here today, thank you. We know you have loads of options. I say this every week. In fairness, I stole this from my friend Natalie. That's a different story. We don't take it lightly that you're here, and we really appreciate it. Before we even get further into this, we would love to hear from you. We'd like to see your comments, drop your questions, share your reactions. We want to make this as much as we can a conversation, not just a broadcast. So last week we asked one question: where is the human in the room when AI generates output? Today we are asking a different question: what is the human in the room feeding the machine? In this case, it's AI, right? Big question.
So, every prompt is a data drop. Every conversation with ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, whatever tool you use to you downloaded this week is a deposit into a data farm your organization doesn't own. You cannot see and could not produce on demand if a regulator asks. That's scary.
That is scary. And most companies have an acceptable use policy. That is what I call being embedded. Most companies can't tell what was fed into the AI just yesterday by their finance team or their legal team or their sales team. That is not an embodied existence around AI and governance.
So what we loved last week, what we had real audiences that brought as much to the conversation as we did. So I'm going to name Heather May as one of our regulars, said it the best in the comments: human in the loop. And I always say this too: the human is on the hook. That is accountability. We all have to be accountable for how we use AI. And then Jeff Masters said, most people are hired for their field craft. They learn data craft when they pick it up. Statecraft is the Wild West. Okay. And Adrian said this technology intersects with trust. And we'll talk about authenticity here too. We are bringing all of that into the room today. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and this is so exciting because our guest brought the line that crystallized the entire episode for us. AI is incredibly powerful. Without structure, it can create far more risk than it creates value. She is a certified change management practitioner, Six Sigma certified, 6 years in regulated energy, 14 years running her own international consulting practice. And then 4 months ago, she co-founded a company called Huge Data Farm to build the enterprise AI infrastructure that organizations in regulated and data-intensive industries need. She has lived this question on both sides. Heather Maines, welcome to the Glass House.
Hi, ladies. What an introduction. I need you guys on every meeting I have, okay, if we can have that introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we first have to kick off. We have a couple of guests where I'm excited about. Richard Laufer, hello. I'm so glad to see you. And then a little friend of yours, Paul Levy's with us, which is exciting.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Heather. I'm so excited because Shira knows your topic is totally geeky. I'm gonna geek out over. So
Absolutely.
so thank you for being with us. So I'm gonna start it off with you. What did you see? What did you see that consulting could not solve from your practices?
Well, honestly, I think a lot of it came from how I was conditioned to think inside of regulated industries. Because before starting a huge data farm and AI governance, I, as Shara mentioned, spent years at Nextera and Florida Power and Light. And for those that aren't familiar, their company is truly focused on operational excellence and innovation. They're focused on being an industry leader, but at the same time, governance and process controls are embedded in how the company operates. So they're constantly balancing innovation with structure. I left the organization to go back to consulting just before ChatGPT and other large language models became widely adopted. But the environment absolutely shaped how I look and think about technology adoption today. So I was back to consulting and consulting with organizations in different industries once AI adoption really started accelerating. And I noticed that there was a huge disconnect. Organizations were moving incredibly fast. Employees were already using AI across different departments every single day. But leadership, as you mentioned, had very little visibility into what was actually happening. So, coming from change management and process improvement, the one thing I know for certain is that when people find tools that make them faster and more efficient, behavior really changes pretty immediately. AI adoption was happening whether organizations were ready for it or not. And at some point, I realized that it wasn't a policy anymore, as Shara mentioned, and when it wasn't a consulting problem anymore. Organizations really didn't just need guidance, they needed infrastructure, visibility, monitoring, and real governance around the usage. That's where Huge Data Farm really built AI Governance Lab to solve for that problem.
It's funny. It just occurred to me, and I don't know why I didn't think of this before. I think timing is everything. I had a couple of things happen to me already today that brought that just to the surface for me in weird ways. I spent over 11 years selling software, mostly HR software up until the last year and a half. But amongst selling the HR software, there was usually other stuff in play. It was finance and ERP and all that stuff. And what you just said really struck me. And this is the thing that I don't know why this is so surprising. The process of selling software took a long time, sometimes years, talking to companies, enterprise level companies, about every aspect of what they were going to do, right? There was an IT input, there was a finance input, there was a board input, and they would talk about things aside from the budget issue. They would talk about things like, well, we need to make sure our infrastructure is ready. We need to make sure all this stuff. It just occurred to me that with AI, I don't hear that conversation at all. I have people coming to me saying, we just put in our AI, or we just gave out 80 licenses, or we're doing, it's almost like candy, that they're passing out candy to their employees without any structure, without any, let's just try it and see how it goes, which is so antithetical to everything that I've ever known in software. And I don't know why that didn't occur to me until now, but it just did. So is that what you're seeing? Is that how when you're talking to companies?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, a lot of them don't know exactly what they're looking to get out of AI usage. And some do. Some have very robust innovation teams and technology teams that are focused on AI. They have a plan. And then there are some that say, we know this will make us more efficient and help us optimize workflow, but we don't know how yet. So we're going to give our employees a chance to use it. I would rather see a company that does create a safe pathway for their employees to use AI than for employees to use AI, which I think is the scariest, is what I call ghost AI. And that's when employees are using AI without it being an enterprise-wide solution.
So can you talk a little bit about that? What does that mean about when it's an enterprise solution? What is that, for those who don't know, what does that mean?
Sure. I think that, first, a lot of organizations have enterprise solutions, whether to different large language models, which we refer to as LLMs. And that could be a ChatGPT, a Copilot. I mean, Copilot is easy, right? So many companies are Microsoft companies, so Copilot is easy. to deploy across their employees. You have Claude, a Perplexity, so many of these LLMs. And I do think there's a little confusion right now between secure infrastructure and governance. So when they have these enterprise solutions, it allows their employees to a license that allows their employees to use them. But enterprise AI platforms absolutely matter from a security perspective. However, secure infrastructure alone doesn't automatically create the visibility or governance that an organization would need. So it doesn't answer for the what are employees putting into the AI and are policies being followed. It doesn't answer those questions. Can leadership prove the oversight at the end of the day, even if they have an enterprise license? And there's a gap there.
So Heather, quick question. Those are really, really important because, people are more trying to do in more their private LLMs, right? Their private systems in place, and they're still trying to figure that out. How is it going to be really secure when you're using Claude? Like, how does that affect? So let me just back up a little bit for those that perhaps when they hear the word data farm, sometimes there's a negative connotation to it, right? So can you just walk some of us through kind of what data farm really means, right, in general, and what you do in that sense?
So for us, Huge Data Farm just happened to be what we were calling our company. We are developers. We have an organization that's developing AI-backed solutions. We saw the need for AI Governance Lab. That's one of our solutions. We do have other AI-backed solutions. And as we are growing, a very early stage company right now, but as we are growing, we're actually looking to be able to come in and take more of a consulting approach to sit down with some of these organizations that say, hey, we're using AI, but we're not quite sure what it is that how we should use it best. Maybe they're looking to develop agents. Agents are definitely, I think, going to be the new phase of what is going to be doing the work for us. If you guys could see what I asked my co-founder and partner to build for me, it's a full organization, 15 business units and 58 agents to run the organization. However, that does not mean that human interaction goes away. I mean, that's going to take oversight and constantly looking at the work and output that comes out of that. But Huge Data Farm, us as an organization, we are essentially, we have platforms that are AI backed and also looking to build customization work for other organizations looking to leverage AI.
So Richard's
you're
very excited because he says data governance is now sexy. This is what makes him happy. I'm so glad, Richard, that you're happy. It's so good. I love it. Sorry,
well,
Daisy, I interrupted you.
Oh,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I want to second Richard there because I am building my own sexy governance around my business as well. So it is actually almost exciting to a point for me that I have guardrails for myself in the processes that I do, because mine is about auditing or looking at your visibility and how do I get you to be seen, so that this needs to be documented and actually, I guess, put a library of the progress from baseline to where you're going to be visible, similar to kind of what Shira does internally. Where are you now and how we're going to see you improve internally at the same time. So for you are the fix in between of what, let's say, Shira is working with them to implement, right, to make those processes. So for me, it would be similar to how can you make your internal processes work as well, in touch with what is being seen outside. So you are a full integration and consulting company that looks at everything from start to finish as far as automation is concerned. Is that what I'm hearing, Heather?
So we do have the ability to do that. Right now, we're really focused on our AI governance lab, but we have the ability, and those are just conversations that are coming up while we are having, demos of the AI governance lab. We just had that conversation this morning with a potential client that said, hey, we also might need some help and how we can leverage different AI tools. And we're happy to come in and do that as well.
Okay.
It's interesting. I want to take a step back for just a second, because I think that before we jump into the idea of organizations, and it doesn't matter how big or small they are, right? But before we get into the idea that an organization is buying their own enterprise level licenses, There's the issue that I'm also seeing, which is a company isn't even protecting their own assets and their own IP, because people, and Daisy, you mentioned this, I think, in the beginning, people are using their own private LLMs, right? They're signing on to their own ChatGPT. They're signing to their own personal Claude accounts, right? Whether they pay for them or not. And if they're not paying for them, we know it's worse, because then there's no protection. But they're at work on a company computer going to a website. And then if they don't necessarily have an enterprise system set up yet, they're still using those LLMs on about the company, right? So I'd love for you to talk about that for just a second, as to what that really means, right? What the impact that is when a company doesn't even understand what's happening. And then we'll kind of take it to the next step then, which is when a company says, okay, great, we're going to go ahead and get our own licenses. Here's how we're going to look at that governance. Is that fair to ask?
I think that's the scariest. And that's where I call that the ghost AI. That to me is so scary. And it's not that employees are doing anything wrong. We're all
Yeah.
guilty of it, you know. Employees are using these tools every day. So if they are not offered from an organization, employees are going to continue to use them. They're going to move fast. They'll summarize information much quicker than we could ever do before, analyze data, even something as simple as drafting communication, solving problems. But how many times have you copied and pasted an email and just said, make this sound more professional? Or for me, in my case, I usually have to say, make this sound a little softer, because my partners say I'm a little too rough in my emails. So, it's just as simple. And in our minds, it's a copy and paste. But
Right.
what happens with those companies that maybe they're a tax firm, and they're working with a company that has an EIN with financial information in this email, and now they've uploaded this into the LLM. If you do not have an enterprise license, so if you're just paying your $20 a month or $100 a month as a single user, and you upload that information into an LLM, that LLM now learns from the information you're putting into it, and it is able to then bring it back to other users when they're asking questions. That is very scary. It's
Right.
very scary. So, companies think that because they have policies in place, that those policies are always being followed. And I don't necessarily know that to be the case. Again, I don't think most employees are trying to do something wrong. They're trying to be more efficient. They're trying to keep up.
Now, my next question is this. Sorry, Shira. Not despite, but when you're putting all these governance and guardrails for them as you enter their organizations or whatever they have set up for their LLMs itself, right? That's the main job that you guys do. It's one thing to make sure that the data is secure, that whatever pulls out is within their own ecosystem. But what if the prompting? How do you then now, because sometimes you can change the way you say things that can, I don't want to see people say manipulate. It's really not manipulated consciously or unconsciously, right? You might say something in a different way, or I don't know if they're allowed to even do NLP, changes the context sometimes of how it's prompted. How do you, does it, there's also there's also a percentage of hallucination. What are your guardrails around that as well? Because you're still getting from an outside source, or is everything just internal within the LLMs as an enterprise?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way that our system is looking at it, it still is going to come down to the organization spending time training them on prompting, making sure that it can be a little bit concerning when what I call that feedback loop, right? Is if you really love something so much, it's always going to tell you that this is great. So you have to ask it to, hey, can you tell me what's wrong with this instead of how great this is? And that's part of that prompting. And I think that's really going to come down to the organization. Where we come in is, let's say you accidentally have a customer's social security number still in that prompt. Our system is that control layer that sits over the LLM, and we will automatically redact that social security number in real time. So you don't have to necessarily worry about that when using what we call AGL, AI Governance Lab. That will automatically happen. But as far as what you're looking to put in and looking to get out, that's still going to come down to the organization and being able to train their employees on how best to prompt.
Wow, that's impressive that you put that layer that
Mhm.
identifies a confidential information. Doesn't matter how they write it down, whether they identify it as SIN or SSN, whether they put those initials and then a number, or the
Mhm.
way the number is written is one big lump or a hyphen. Your system automatically assumes it's either a phone number or a social security number.
Yes,
It's
correct.
from that way to learn that. Okay, that's very impressive. That's a lot of layers that you have to go over and over to stress test, because I'm doing one for my audit. I stress test all the time. And I'm noticing the prompting is the most critical part of how you put those guardrails. So that's impressive to put it at an enterprise level. So yay. Thank you for what you do.
And I
One
think
of the
it really Thank you.
no,
I'm sorry. I think it really helps that our other co-founder, all of us came from some type of regulated industry. So for myself, it was energy. Another co-founder, he came from a healthcare tech background, and another one from financial services. So we all have that understanding of how important regulated industries are and what security parameters we need to have to make sure that we are giving the employees the ability to use something safely without, of course, taking any time away from it. It has to be done in real time. We have to make sure the employees can use it safely, but without it adding any additional time to them.
Well, the regulatory part of it too that you can't control is what regulatory things are you going to put in there, especially coming from the spaces. Healthcare is number one with a lot of compliance and regulatory stuff. And so if you're putting in the healthcare system, how does it affect HR with their compliance of documents, all that, how they're putting that in there? That's a lot of work. So kudos
sure.
to you. It's constantly evolving. So thank you for that. Mind-blowing thing. So.
I love that. One of the things, Heather, that got me so excited when I first learned about you and Huge Data Farm was the fact that you get very specific by industry, right? And I'd
Mhm.
love you to talk a little bit about that because you just mentioned three, right? In highly regulated energy, banking, finance, or finance and healthcare. But there's also hundreds of other kinds of industries. And I just felt that, and it's funny because when I was at Infor, we took an ERP approach that was industry specific, and that was really powerful. So we were delivering out of the box. I say we still, it's been so many years, but they deliver out of the box an ERP or solution that is specific to an industry, which is a time saver, right? Because you're not implementing stuff. But I want you to explain a little bit about why, from a governance perspective, that industry specificity is so powerful because I thought it was fantastic.
Sure. So, especially regulated industries, but not just regulated industries.
Mhm.
Most regulated industries have security frameworks that they have to abide by. And what we've already done is we have already built those frameworks into our system. The one thing that, I mean, I, of course, love all things AI Governance Lab, but the one thing that I appreciate coming from someone who's done enterprise implementations on the other end is we've really built the system to be a seamless integration into your everyday workflow. The implementation, even at large scale, will take realistically no more than 4 weeks, and sometimes it can even be done in days. And the reason why is because we already have those security frameworks built into the system. Not only that, but we can toggle them on, toggle them off, as simple as when we're onboarding the customer and they say, hey, this isn't for us, no problem. We hit a switch and it turns right off from that security framework. And we can also develop new ones very easily, very simply as part of that implementation process. But each one of those frameworks are really industry specific. So you have so many of them. I know we have customers that we're talking to from healthcare, from financial services, from hospitality, the energy side of things, and the list goes on.
Yeah,
Does that
that's so
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, no, the frameworks are critical because that's your foundation, right? On the steps you're going to need and to keep those guardrails on. And that's what's making Shira and myself successful in this space is that we have a framework that we lean on, that we are promising that we follow to get to your goals and your where your potential needs to be as well. So that's super cool. Yeah,
one
that's a I have one for all the businesses, but you guys have a lot for every industry. That's a lot to put together. So
One industry I didn't mention when we were talking about those frameworks, we've actually recently built what we call AGL Safeguard. That's for our education system. So that is from K to 12. And we have not fully deployed that yet, but the product is ready to go. And that's really exciting too, because those have different parameters around it. That's for not only the use of educators, right? Whether they're teachers or the principal or counselor, but it's also for student usage as well. This is where, in this system particularly, this is actually able to also be able to recognize the tone. So is there bullying involved? When is there inappropriate behavior when they're going to these LLMs, right? You create a picture of, use your imagination, what some of these kids may be out here doing, and it's able to identify that. And not only identify that, it's able to notify whoever we have set in place, whether it's the teacher. Then the teacher has an opportunity to respond. If it doesn't go to the teacher and they don't respond, then it goes to the principal, and so on and so forth, up that chain of command, so that it really truly is to protect the students along with the educators.
That's incredible. As you were talking about this, I was in my mind playing the setup in my different LLMs and thinking, I don't ever remember seeing, maybe I didn't pay attention to it because it didn't matter, but I never saw like a child lock, right? Is there someone under 18? And it didn't occur to me, again, not my rodeo, not something I need to worry about, but is there a child using this tool, right? Because then that child could go out and create something unbelievably inappropriate in any, without any kind of guidance. I never even thought about that.
And yeah, and it's happening all the time. I mean, my 12-year-old sister just used it to create an entire book. She has me reading a book that she put together.
Right, but she didn't do something totally inappropriate. But
but we monitor that.
Right, but is there something in it, like for someone who's using it at home? Is there some kind of monitoring that can happen with the? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but now I'm gonna, when we stop this, I'm gonna go look and see what's there. But that again never occurred to me. I didn't think about that would need to be something that we'd have to think about in the school systems, where I'm sure on the computers in the schools, they're teaching AI, they're using AI, and they could go off the rails, quite frankly.
Sure. And you don't want to restrict it, right? Because there are amazing things that can come out of leveraging AI and large language models. I mean, I use 4 or 5 of them daily on a regular basis, from very simple things to very complex things. So we don't want to restrict it, but we definitely want to make sure that there's not just monitoring and visibility, but there's actual control over that too, especially when you are an educator or you're an organization, and that's your responsibility. Daisy had mentioned, I believe it was Daisy that mentioned, what if an investor or a board member or a regulator comes to you today as an organization and says, can you prove what was put into your AI by your employees over the last 30 days? Right. Well, can you? And most can't. And there's definitely a blind spot there. Unless, of course, they have AGL.
Right. Well, I think this is really incredible, because I just, again, I just have these moments over and over again. I just put on my HR hat, right? And I'm thinking, I've got employees using, let's assume for a second they're using an enterprise level and there's, guardrails. But somebody goes in and creates something or does something that is not HR compliant, right? How would I know? How would I be notified as the head of HR that something's going on that isn't appropriate from an HR perspective, right? And I think these are the kinds of things that I don't want it to be big brother-ish, right? That's not the point. If people are going to do bad things, odds are they're going to do it anyway. However, I think it's a teaching moment and an opportunity to get ahead of this kind of thing, right? You mentioned bullying. Well, guess what? Adults are bullies too. So the ability then to have an eye on what's going on. Now, I have to bring this up because it's in the news this week. I'm sure both of you heard that Meta just announced they're going to be tracking. Did you hear about this? That they're going to be tracking key clicks, because they want their employees who are left that didn't get riffed to now be the trainers of their LLMs by what they're clicking at work. So this is the other end of the spectrum of what we're talking about, right? We're talking about guardrails and protection. They're talking about training models. And if I'm getting this wrong, whoever's in the audience, if I'm wrong, correct me. But I believe that that's what they said, that they are going to now, and the issue that came up was these employees now are not getting paid to train their language models, right? They're basically doing it on the dime, but they're going to monitor every single click into their systems to be able to do that. So do people have to be fearful when governance is put in that the same kind of thing can happen because it is being monitored, right? However, is it that big brotherish that they're going to know exactly what people are doing, or is it no different than what we have today? Because I know in every HR policy manual I've done in the last 20 years, it says, we have the right to review whatever you put into our systems, right? It's our system. So that's no different than that, I guess.
Yeah, I would think that it's no different than that. From a governance standpoint, if you're looking at it from a leadership of the organization, we want to be able to have an audit track and retention of what is going into that AI tool. What happens if there's a data breach? And
Right.
and then you can say, we know for certain that did not come from our AI usage because we went back into our audit trail, we did the research, and we were able to see that data never went into an LLM or on the other AI tools that we have connected to a system like this that is governing it. So yes, I think it can be very big brotherish in that sense, but if we're doing something for business purposes or on a business computer, I mean, you have to also, I always felt like even a conversation in Teams, I never know at the time, my boss could be looking at this. So I think that big brother feeling is there, whether it's through AI governance or using Microsoft email, Teams, something like that.
Well, from a legal perspective, anything the company owns is discoverable, right? So
Mhm.
if at any point in time an organization is in litigation of any kind or has any kind of audit or whatever, anything they own is now discoverable. I mean, it used to be years ago, I don't think we do it as much because nobody wants to carry 2 phones, but when companies would issue phones, I, along with a lot of my friends, would have a second phone, right?
Mhm.
Personal phone. Because for that reason, right? I don't want my personal data and my personal information on a company phone, right? If I want to yell at somebody on a text message, I'm going to do it myself. And I think that's fair, right? Separating personal space from workspace. And I think that it is also fair, and I've argued this point many times with people when I say, if you're to your point, Heather, if I'm using a company computer and a company piece of software, that's the company's business, right? Anything can be there. But I think it is interesting that we're delving deeper into this more and more, and we're putting more into systems, right? It used to be maybe an email, maybe a file. Now it's conversation. Now it's so much more than it ever was. And where and how do we draw the line? So I think, and I there needs to be governance from a technical perspective, but there also needs to be governance from a policy perspective, right? Those have to be hand in hand. And organizations need to explain very carefully to their employees why they're doing this, what the purpose is. But before any of that can happen, and again, I'm taking a big leap backwards again, and I've had this conversation a few times, you and I have talked about this, an organization needs to know why it is they want AI. They can't want it. Daisy, as you said last week, you reminded us of Josh's famous story. Heather, I told this to you too, that, I want an escalator, but I only have a 1-story building. Why do we need it? What are we going to do with it? What value is it going to bring? And what do we want to get out of it? Because if those questions can't be answered, if there's no real understanding of what it's bringing, it's an escalator in a 1-story building at that point, right? And so I think that's really important for people to sit down and have that conversation. And it might be a difficult one, right? People might not know what it is that they want to do. And so working with, and understanding how that's going to take place, I think is critical.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's going to be a challenging question to answer because depending on the size of the organization, different business units may have different use cases for it. And some may or may not know at this moment because AI truly is moving so quickly that every day I turn my computer on and it says, restart Claude because there's been an upgrade, right? And And
Yeah.
so there's always something new that's coming out of it and how we can use it. So I do think the question will be hard to answer, but at least to have some type of framework around that to help with the policies. But you really, in my opinion, in order to feel as a leader fully secure in AI usage, the policy and the governance really should come hand in hand, because a lot of organizations believe that governance means just having acceptable policies. And those
Right.
policies are not going to protect them when they're questioned, can you prove this? And I think that's going to be really important. And to be quite honest, I think that in many industries, they're going to be forced to prove that they're actually going to have to demonstrate the governance around AI at some point. If right now we saw healthcare, HIPAA requirements are requiring healthcare institutions and practices to be able to prove how they're using AI. And that's only, I believe, going to grow alongside different industries.
I hate to
Yeah,
say this, but sorry, Daisy, I'll just say this and I'll turn it over to you. Well, the one thing we know for certain is that lawyers will find a way to make litigation happen based on this. So you can be guaranteed that there are lawyers, no offense, sitting with ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude. How can I make more money with AI? Let's just call a spade, right?
well,
Sorry.
it's happening not just for lawyers. And the big news, and Heather, you probably know this, Claude just released their version for legal, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Because that one just got released, and clearly even the topic we had last week was from a law firm that was that their AI hallucinated and they had it out in public. So that's, again, not just an internal, but an external visibility problem, right? And so, I'm sorry, I'm layering my question to you, Heather. So I didn't mean to, but from that perspective, like Shira said, that lawyers are going to start abusing this, and how do I make $1 million? As we talk about in the glass, how there's external visibility, which is, what AI says about you, and then there's internal visibility, what are people say to AI, which is what you do. They're the same problem from two different sides, right? So when you talk to a client, how do you frame the one problem? Do you frame this one problem or two problems?
Oh, I would say I probably focus on just our expertise, kind of framing it from what you're putting into it at this point. But having the conversation with you really makes me think of it so many different ways as well. And and I think that you had brought up the attorneys. What I found interesting on the legal side of things, and I am no legal expert by any means, but what I found interesting was that there were attorneys that were using some type of LLM for their cases. But once they have disclosed the information from the client side, they actually have lost client attorney privilege because they're sharing the information of their client to this LLM, which is in turn visible to others and discoverable, which I thought that was absolutely incredible. So from an AI governance side, there is possibly ways that you could still leverage that, and making sure that any client name and data and information and date of birth can automatically be redacted before going to the LLM. So now things are just situational questions opposed to directly related to a specific case.
I mean, I can remember in my law firm days, on a couple of occasions, I would get frantic phone calls. And this might have happened 2 or 3 times over 10 years, but I would get a frantic phone call that one of the lawyers left his briefcase on the train, right? And it had client files in it, right?
Oh, no.
And yeah. And so what you just said, right, is, oh my God, this information now is out of my hands and is potentially in the hands of somebody else. And if somebody wanted to take advantage of that, they could, right? And so there's an issue. What we were talking about last week, as a reminder to those who are on, is that we were talking about the other side of it, which was the human in the room that needed to take responsibility. So yes, we have to assume that the technology will fail, will hallucinate, will do things, because it is still a machine and it is not a human. And so it doesn't remove our obligation ever as the human responsible. Just like if I am the partner or I am the owner or I'm the parent, it doesn't remove my responsibility from making sure that I've done what was necessary to make sure that the work product is accurate, right? And that was really what we focused on last week. Where was the human who was responsible?
And I think if anything, AI actually increases the human accountability because
Yes.
humans are still responsible for the things that AI can't do, the judgment, the validation, the decision making. That is not
Right.
what AI is meant to do.
No. And we don't want it, right? For everyone screaming and yelling about losing our jobs, what we don't want is AI taking over the judgment issue because it can't, right? It doesn't have context, it doesn't have experience, it doesn't have any of that stuff. We talk about that a lot. We love it, and that's not what it's meant to do. So I think that, again, we're moving at such a fast pace. And so what I said last week when we talked about that one particular issue with that one law firm was that's really where the policies, the procedures, the training wasn't embodied, right? And so if we're not taking care of the human side and the technical side, if we're not doing the governance that you provide, and then in my case, we embody the change within the organization to understand it's not just about doing this, and it's not just about, it's really understanding not just the what, but the how and the why. And really getting people to say, I understand that I'm going to have all of this amazing time that I didn't have before because this phenomenal tool is going to research and do all these other things. Great. And we need to be more precise. We need to take that amazing time and be more strategic, more analytical, more thought-provoking. It makes us better, it makes our minds work more, not less, because we're not doing the mundane. And I think that's where we need to, I hope that's where we're going with this. The more guardrails we can put, the more protection we can give people to be far better, more strategic, more creative, more of everything. That's how I see it. That's my kind of positioning on the whole thing.
So, Heather, from where you sit and where your organization sits, what would you tell people that are watching us, or leaders, or even just individuals, why governance and ethics is very important in the world that we live in right now? And I guess the big picture, why what you do matters, because I believe in it, because I'm doing it for myself, and that's what I also tell my clients. So I want to hear from where you're sitting, because you see so many different industries at a higher scale than who I'm dealing with right now. So
Sure. I mean, I think the lack of governance itself is enough because it's scary, right? You're always exposed at a data breach risk, and we know that that can take a company right down, if not cause millions of dollars and a lot of other heartache to the people that that data has been leaked on. So that in itself is one major risk. But the other is being able to make sure that you are offering tools and pathways for your employees to be able to leverage the efficiencies and optimizations, but in a safe way. And that's really important, right? I think that that visibility is important, but visibility really starts with acknowledging the reality. What is happening in your organization? Understand the usage. What tools are your employees using, right? How are they using? And most importantly, what I think, what data is being entered into those tools? And how can you actually govern and stop that data from getting into a large language model? I mean, the governance to me is going to be, it's not going to be a question very soon. It's going to be a requirement. I think that's where we're going towards.
I think it's a perfect time to do our story, Daisy. I think you're leading us today on our outside story. Yeah, so I wanna bring up some information. We're gonna talk a little bit about what we're seeing. We're gonna put some numbers behind this that I think are pretty valuable. Are you ready to
okay,
kick it off?
I'm ready to kick it off. So bear with me, guys. So we
Amazing.
have our inside story today. So every week we bring in a story from the outside into the room, because the glass is not just about our own experience, it's about what's happening out there and to the people watching this. So we start off with IBM cost of a data breach report in 2025. 13% of organizations had an AI related breach. 97% of those organizations had no AI access controls, and shadow AI added $670,000 to the average breach cost. Okay, that's one. Next, Layer X Enterprise AI Security Report says that 18% of enterprise employees paste corporate data into AI tools. This is what Heather's talking about. 89% of that access goes through unmanaged personal accounts that bypass enterprise controls entirely. Shira just mentioned that, using your own LLM on your phone. Most organizations cannot see this happening. This is the floor.
Okay, so let me tell you about the ceiling, because we're going to take the other side of it, right? And this is crazy information. I can't believe it. In August of 2025, the acting director of the CISA, the federal agency that exists to defend US government networks and tell other agencies how to govern AI, uploaded at least 4 documents marked for official use only into the public version of ChatGPT. Look at your face, Heather. Like, yeah, the person that's responsible. He had requested a special exception. Most DHS employees were blocked from public ChatGPT entirely. CISA had already built a safer alternative called DHS Chat Sandboxed, data sovereignty preserved, nothing leaves federal networks. He bypassed the entire tool, all of it. Now, we don't know why. We're not pointing fingers. This is just data that we know. His own agency censors caught him. A routine audit of his prompts surfaced the violations. DHS opened an investigation. He was moved out of the director role. Obviously, why wouldn't he have been? And this is a case where everything worked. The policy was embedded, the block was embedded, the safer tool was embedded, the exception process was embedded, the sensors were embedded, the audit was embedded, everything was there. And the leader who was supposed to embody all of it did not. So this is kind of what I love to talk about. That is the other side. That's the ceiling of it all.
And I
Crazy,
think,
right?
yeah, and I think, I have no idea why or
Right.
how that managed to happen.
Right.
But the reality is we're using these tools so much, some of us, right? I'm in them all of the time. I have several windows open, probably why when we started this, my screen was so slow, because I have about 1,000 windows open and 10 of which are AI. So
Right.
you're honestly using it so much that it's an easy mistake to make if you don't have all of the security governance parameters in place for your employees. Unless, of course, you will have those employees that will go outside and they'll go to their phone and they'll upload something, and unfortunately there's only so much you can control, but why
Right.
not control what you can and you have the ability to do?
And these are extremes, right? I mean, we want to bring extreme examples, and there's, most organizations are somewhere between the floor and the ceiling, right? We're not saying that, these are some kind of crazy scenarios that we love to bring up because, number one, it's always good to hear that we're not the only ones when we're making these mistakes, right? And we know mistakes are going to happen with intent and without intent, right? However, it's everything you just said. It is putting the guardrails in place, having the right processes in place, and then ensuring for a fact that all of that is embodied in the individuals, that people know what they're supposed to do, why they're supposed to do it, and what the consequences are if they don't, right? That has to be there. That's critical.
And honestly, I think the companies that get this right, they're going to move so much faster because they'll have the confidence in how AI is being used across their organization.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's such an incredible world that we're living in. We say it all the time. We love it. We think it's great. I think today my Google crashed today at one point, and I went, oh my God. And then I thought, oh, please God, everything come back. And I had 27 different Claude windows open. Just Claude. Different chats, different things going on. And
So,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Days.
finish your thoughts, Shira, because it's something related to what you're saying.
No, I think it's a given that this is how we're living and what we're doing. And I think it's wonderful. And it's also the wild, wild west, right? There's so much we don't know. There's so much we haven't been able to understand yet. And it's just critical that we are protected in all the ways that we can be.
So to your point where you have Claude open, another Claude open, for me, I multi-Claude is what I call it, because I multitask, because now I can actually literally multitask all at the same time, or having one folder going on for something that it needs. Because now it's how I'm working on it is more than just, a 30-second reply. I strategically have to to ask it questions or do judgment thinking, stress tests, and it goes back to one folder is working on it. I need that answer so I can give to the next folder for my, auditor to do the governance check on it. You know what I mean? The layers of the agentic work now starts to happen. And to your point, Shira, is that your Google crashed because of all the tabs that you have open just for that. I also have the other LLMs where I look at their answer based on comparing what's hallucination versus not. So from your space right now, you're obviously looking at an actual solution for them. Does the LLM matter on what data is put in or how they use it internally? That's my big question to you. How do you choose which LLM governs a particular organization? That's a question for me.
Oh gosh, Daisy, I'm like you. I use all of them too, and I'm double checking and running it from one to the other. And I love Claude, but I hit my max all the time, so I'm always running it to I'm always running it to another LLM. With our system, it allows organizations to make the choice for themselves. So we actually have the capability. And what's so great too is not only does it have the capability, but what we're seeing right now is that many of these organizations are, as I mentioned, rolling out Copilot because they're already embedded into Microsoft. It's very easy for them as they're rolling it out to their employees. And then maybe, two business units are using Claude. Maybe their marketing team will not go away from Claude. Maybe their analysts are using ChatGPT. Well, we have the ability to sit over all of those LLMs, but also for the organization to be able to say, hey, everyone can use Copilot, but based on our directory, only give this group or this business unit access to Claude and give these people in this business unit access to ChatGPT. And if you have multiple permissions as an employee, you can actually click through and use multiple LLMs opposed to just having to pick one, if that's what the organization chooses.
Now, the next layer to that is, as you and I experienced, Monday alone, my data doesn't reset on Claude till Friday. I was already at 40% in my usage. And the max, I reached that within 30 to 40 minutes, and I have to wait 4 hours later to actually have to access. I have to monitor now which models I'm using just to allocate my usage, right? And so now the companies, enterprise, need to have gas money, AI gas money. Are you seeing a big impact on how they're making that decision now and the usage of how their employees are going to use it? Because now that's going to be a budget thing now. The cost of AI is no longer cheap, or what used to be free for the models is now attached to tokens and pennies and dollars.
Yeah, I would say we're definitely seeing that, and I think a lot of the organizations don't know yet. They're not sure how to look at it, and even some of them, I say, hey, start with a simple survey. Ask your employees what they're using and how they're using it. Some you may not have to give Claude because they don't even know how to use it. They're simply asking a chat a question or change my email for me. Where other teams are doing full analysis on
Right.
financial data or whatever that data is going in. So you could start by just asking and doing a survey to see. Our system also tracks token, and I think
Okay.
the token usage, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around token usage. And we were talking to one of our partners about doing some type of education series on what the token usage is, how to use it, what you're actually looking at, because even I blow through them, and he's like, why did you do that? Well, I didn't know. I was doing what I needed to do. That's all.
So let me ask this, and I don't even know if this is a possibility. If we can restrict across who has access to what license, obvious, right? If it's single sign-on and we say, no, you don't have access to Claude, you have access to this. Okay. Is it possible to restrict can it be set up that they, with projects or things, so they can only do certain kinds of tasks, that they don't have access to maybe uploading certain kinds of documents or uploading it all, or I don't know, how granular can that governance be or that control be at the user level?
I like to say anything is possible with my business partner because he is like a mad scientist and a
That's
magician.
yeah.
Right now, the system is not designed to do that, but I'll make
Okay.
sure that we put that on our priority list because I do think that's important, right? A lot of it, as we mentioned, organizations don't know yet. So when you have these questions, it helps us make the enhancements to our platform. Now, the other thing I like to mention is AI is moving so fast. We
Mhm.
talked about how every time I start my computer, I have to reload something, but our system is also changing weekly and enhancing, sometimes daily. I saw today we did a demo and there was something new that wasn't there yesterday. So we are moving just as fast as these large language models. And we truly have to, right? Our thought and our mindset is how can we disrupt ourselves and how can we be ahead of that?
That's amazing. Tell Jim I'll take credit for that one. It'll be fine. We'll do that together. I say this, we say this every single week, the time flies. And so I just want to make sure we get a few things in before, and I'd like to, before we close, make sure that we, every week Daisy and I like to give our action items, right? Things that people can do, little things people can do, lessons learned about, what we're trying to put out there in the world. And I'm calling mine this week the 30-day paced audit, right? So this week, if you're in an organization, pick a team, a sales team, finance team, legal, marketing, pick one. I don't care who it is. And ask the leader of that team one single question in the last 30 days, or you can kind of set them up for the next 30 days, however you want to do it. What was the most sensitive thing anybody in your team has pasted into an AI tool?
Ooh.
Right? So first, if the answer is, I don't know, that's your starting point, right? There's the first thing that you'll know that there's a problem, right? And maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it's just a starting point, right? Start having that conversation, because if they don't know, then there's a lot that needs to be discussed. So have that 10-minute, 15-minute conversation. It's a great diagnostic to see what's going on inside the organization. So that's mine for this week. So Daisy, what is yours?
So mine is a continuation from last week. Last week I said, just do a simple check, whatever LLM you're using, just say, look, ask who you are, who your company is, see if they know it. If you show up, then great. If you don't, then you have a bigger problem, which means AI doesn't know your business exists or you exist, even as a human being, right? Because now you can be found even through your LinkedIn or social media. So the next layer to that is, if you actually found yourself in any of the LLMs that mentions you or your company, I want you to read through what it says, okay? The first part might get it correct, but as you read through the bottom, let me know if they actually read what you have on, not just on your website, but is it connect what you have on your LinkedIn to the story you have on your website or any other platform that speaks about you, or any citations that you have. Do those connect into one true factual story about you? And I will guarantee you there's going to be not just an hallucination, they're going to pick something up that's not you. But because if you don't have those entities connected the way AI wants to read it to connect you, Heather knows this, then it's a mismatch, because LLMs look for data and sets to follow rules. And if you're not connecting those nodes about your entity, AI doesn't know, because he thinks you're an artist, you think you're a cartoon character, or he thinks that you are a president of another country. Those can coincide in the world of AI because it's assuming its probabilities of data. But if you don't connect those two in a particular way that AI understands, then you have a bigger problem. So that's my next challenge to you.
Claude gave me a husband yesterday. I didn't know I had.
Awesome. Great. Where's the person at?
Can he send mine too, please?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was writing something and it said, and I said, give me a follow up. I was, just doing some stuff. I said, give me a follow up, and it said, and my husband agrees. And I go, I'm sorry, what? What? And then I wrote, because I was being cheeky. And so I go, can you find me one? Because it did something else. It moved me somewhere. It had me. Lately it's been like making stuff up about my life. Like I'm like, where did you get this? I'm like, okay, but that goes to the same thing. If I were just doing a copy paste, if I wasn't paying attention to something as simple as, I think it might have been like a note to a response to a LinkedIn post, or I don't know what it was that I was trying to get done. If I didn't read it, it would have me married with 7 cats and living in I don't know where. I don't know what it was doing. Heather, I want to thank you so much for coming. Is it okay? Can we share how people can reach you? Is that all right?
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it's entirely our pleasure. And Nicole, if you're still there, I'm so glad you were here and you didn't say anything in the comments, but we'll talk later. Nicole is really wonderful. This is your LinkedIn to connect on LinkedIn. So reach out, Heather, if you want to just kind of give us a 60-second of whatever else you want to talk about yourself or Huge Data Farm. Now's your chance.
Well, I would just say that, please feel free to reach out. We would love to have a conversation, show you the system, have a little bit of a demo, or even just understand how you're using AI. And maybe there's ways that we could come up with different solutions for you. I love the challenges that you guys gave your audience. I think one thing to really think about as you're putting things into AI, how often are you entering something into an AI tool that you wouldn't willingly share with a stranger? So is it confidential information? Is it very confidential things on the project you're working on or the product you're developing? So how much are you sharing with AI that you wouldn't just tell a stranger on the street? Maybe think about that.
I love that. Nicole, I'll ask Claude if he'll take your husband. I'll see what I can do about that. She's offering her husband to Claude, so that's great. I love it. I want to also make sure everyone knows how to reach us. If you don't already, please feel free to reach out to Daisy or to me. We would love to hear from you, have more conversations about what we all do, and how we're going to get through all of this together, with or without husband. And Daisy, I'll let you sign us off today.
So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Like we said earlier, your time is valuable, so thank you for choosing us. And also, we are going to take a break next week. We kind of do this cycle where we take a break or there's an event going on. So next week, you're not going to see us. I know you're going to miss us, but we'll be back the week after. And then hope to see you all there. So have a great 2 weeks, I guess, from not seeing you, but we'll be back with more power and more fun.
We sure will. Thank you again, everybody. See you soon. And hopefully before you'll reach out. Bye-bye.